One of the things that really bothers me about the tarot community is the lying. The lying, the embellishing, the romanticizing. There's some tarot readers out there that take parts of this job and they fully embellish it, or they just straight up lie about the reality of what it's like to be a tarot reader. So today, I'm going to tell you guys a story from many, many moons ago. Before I started my tarot business, I took advice from what I thought were experienced, talented, professional tarot readers on how to gain experience and how to gain clientele. And in my experience, it turned out to be just a load of crap. It was not what I expected at all. It was not what I had been told at all. And I quickly realized that there's like a romanticized commercial version of being a tarot reader. And then there's the reality, which is actually a lot difficult. So today, I just have a story for you all about the reality of what it's like to be a tarot reader and trying to start your business. What can you actually expect, and what is good advice and what's bad advice and what's just downright terrible advice, because I've heard it all and I've tried almost everything. So about 12 years ago, plus 10 years ago or so, I had taken a course in tarot. I had been studying tarot for many years, and I finally felt like I was competent enough with the cards and the meanings and the esoteric knowledge to finally start reading for others. I had been reading for my friends and family, but it's very, very different if you're going to read for strangers and try to build a clientele base as a tarot reader. So, of course, where do I turn to get wisdom and advice but the internet? And I would find spiritual teachers or other tarot readers or people that had thousands of followers and seemed to be very successful in their spiritual practice. And I would try to find what I could about their resume. How did they become successful? Where did they get experience? Because there's a big difference between knowing how to read tarot and being able to read tarot for other people. There's a whole psychology, customer service, way of communicating, tableside manner, so to speak. There's a lot of things that you can't learn from a book that you actually have to do in real life, that you've got to actually work with people. And I wanted to build my practice the old school way. I did not want to, pimp myself out on social media and spend hours a day marketing myself. I'm not an influencer. I'm a tarot reader. And so I really just wanted to go out, read for the public, meet clients, and then start to build a reputable client base over time. So when I found experienced tarot readers, I would typically hear the same kind of story. Either they read in a metaphysical shop, they read in cafes, or they read in restaurants and bars, or festivals and events. So that's how they would interact with the public, and that's how they would gain experience. So I tried all of those. And the experience that I had in reality of reading for those places was not the romanticized version of what I had been told. So a lot of people would say, a lot of experienced professional tarot readers would say like, oh yeah, I read at pubs and bars. I would do it every weekend. I would work with hundreds of clients in a weekend. I would make a ton of money and it would be great experience. And that's how I learned to build a clientele base. So being the young and naive tarot reader that I was like, okay, if it worked for them, I'm going to try to copy their formula and see if it'll work for me. This seems to be a common trope in the tarot community that they read at cafes, restaurants, and bars. So I'm going to try myself. The first thing that you'll find is not a lot of restaurants, bars, or cafes are open to accepting tarot readers. Being a tarot reader is still very taboo. You're definitely gonna meet people of like religious beliefs that might not be supportive, so expect to get a lot of doors closed in your face. From a restaurant owner's perspective, there's not really an incentive to invite a tarot reader into their restaurant. However, I had been a hostess at a restaurant and I knew the owner, and they were very, very popular for brunch. They would, like, the whole restaurant would be packed for brunch. And the owner was like, yeah, you can set a table and read cards. Like, that sounds fun, you know? And I was like, great. This is my first time, like, actually going into the public with my tarot cards. I was so nervous. I didn't know what to expect. I set a table. I had it decorated. I had a sign. I thought my tarot readings were very affordable, very cheap, and quick. I kept them under 10 to 15 minutes. So what was my experience? What is the reality of actually reading during brunch? Well, a lot of people go to brunch after church, so you tend to find people that are not supportive of religious or spiritual alternative practices. So I did meet a lot of people that were dismissive or rude to me. But thankfully, as the most part, I just actually sat there bored. I actually sat there and did nothing much. And what I found was that when people go out to a restaurant, when people go out for brunch, they actually are just hungry. They want to eat and they want to spend time with the person that they're there with. So it's actually quite inconvenient and maybe a little bit rude to leave your table, leave your guest, and go get a tarot reading for 10 to 15 minutes, even if it's a quick tarot reading, which the clients who enjoyed the tarot reading, who liked the session, never wanted it to end after 10 minutes. My readings nowadays are an hour, and it's very common that people will go over an hour and they don't want the session to end, and there's more information for us to uncover. So trying to fit a valuable tarot reading in 10 to 15 minutes is actually really difficult because there tends to be so much information, and when you get into a groove and the person is really like receptive and excited about the reading, they don't want it to end. They want more, right? But for the most part, I sat there during brunch, and even though I smiled and waved, I introduced myself, I had a sign, most people go to restaurants to eat and leave, and they socialize with their friends, and they don't necessarily want to leave the table, especially people with children. They don't want to leave the table to get a tarot reading. So I did that for a couple of weekends, and I didn't make any money. And so I said, okay, well, so the brunch thing didn't work out for me. Let me go back and see the advice of these professional tarot readers and see like what else did they do. And a large number of tarot readers didn't do brunch, but they did bars. They did like dive bars, places where people come to socialize. And there's like a lot of people. So I said, okay, let me go to a bar and read tarot. And I had a couple of bars that were acceptable, that were happy to let me read, on the condition that, of course, I gave free readings to the staff. So if you're going to be a tarot reader and you're going to read at a restaurant, literally every single person is going to want a free tarot reading. And when I say every person, I mean like the waiters, the bartender, the chefs, the dishwasher, the managers, everybody is going to want a tarot reading. And so you get there early, you get your cards set up, and what ends up happening is, and I think, I'm not trying to make a general statement about, I'm not trying to stereotype people who work in restaurants, but a lot of them don't need tarot readings. They actually need like real therapy. And tarot can be very therapeutic. It can be very healing to have someone listen to you and offer you empathy and support. But I am not a medical therapist. I am not a doctor. And there were a lot of people who had very serious issues, like addiction issues, that were, that's not my purview. As a tarot reader, I'm a spiritual healer. So, and maybe I'll make another video about what is spiritual healing, and how we can use that to strengthen our lives and our resilience. But I would basically pull cards for these restaurant employees, and I would get trauma dumped on. Like, I would hear about abuse, addiction, like broken families, everything that you could think of that was like raw and vulnerable and intense. But we're at these people's work. Like, we're not in a private environment. We're sitting at like a booth in the corner of the restaurant. And after, a little while, it wasn't uncommon for employees to start crying. I had a dishwasher break down and cry in front of me because he was talking about, how he got into an accident and was handicapped and couldn't afford medical care and lived his life in pain. Like, this is not the appropriate place to be crying at work. And then, of course, the other coworkers would like walk by and eavesdrop to kind of snoop on what the tarot reading was, which made me feel very uncomfortable, because here I'm trying to provide like a healing space for someone. I'm trying to offer them support and comfort, and it's turning into a gossip circus. But yet they loved it. I loved reading for these people. Like, reading for people at restaurants was definitely the most colorful clients that I've ever had. They were deep, they were nuanced, they were raw, and like, there's something about having a tarot reading that if you come to it with sincerity, it can just really open your soul up to depths that you haven't explored before. However, doing that at work is not the appropriate place for such an intense experience. So I was like, oh, this is terrible. Like, I have a dishwasher who's crying right now and he's got to go back to work. Or I've got a server who is processing the pain of a breakup, and just, this is not a private venue that's appropriate for people to have such vulnerable, visceral experiences through tarot. So that was the first part. And then they wanted readings every single time I came to the restaurant. So every single weekend that I did tarot readings at the bar, they would literally be like, I am so excited for my reading before our shift. And it was fine, but it also fatigued me. Doing like 12 or 15 readings for free before your work shift is actually really fatiguing, especially when they're very intense, emotional, spiritually like guttural tarot readings. So then, after I read for all of the restaurant staff, then I would sit at the bar, or I'd have a table, and of course I'd have a sign. And the people that typically come to bars are not those seeking spiritual services. So all of the tarot readers, the professional tarot readers who had been saying I gained my experience reading at restaurants and bars, they're not the right clients. These are not the right clients. They're not coming to a restaurant or a bar to have spiritual healing, for transformation, for maturity, for, changing their life. They're really there to socialize and get drunk. And so a lot of clients I had would either be creepy old men that would just hit on me, men who were trying to get my number, men who wanted attention from a woman, and then a couple of women would be there, but they typically, especially when you combine alcohol, just their emotions would not be grounded at all. So, not to mention the tables are kind of sticky at bars, like don't bring any cards that you don't want to be damaged. So it was not a great experience in the sense of like, I couldn't do the healing work that I wanted to do. I wasn't meeting clients in the appropriate scene or setting. The work that I was able to do, the meaningful work that I was able to do was actually on the restaurant staff, but it wasn't the appropriate place. It wasn't a private place to do that kind of work. I think the restaurant staff was probably the only part of reading at a bar that I enjoyed, but interacting with the public was exhausting, typically creepy and dismissive and rude. And it's not, if you are a young tarot reader and you're trying to get experience, I would completely write this off. I would, it wasn't the romanticized stories that I had heard from others. When before I actually tried this, I literally heard stories from other tarot readers, especially other tarot readers online, and their version of reading at restaurants and bars was totally different than my experience. And they used it, one of the reasons why they talked about it so much is they used it as a way to gain credibility in their business. And they would say, well, I've been a tarot reader for X amount of years, and I've worked in these places with the public, and you can trust me as a tarot reader because look at all these years of experience that I've had being a reader. And like literally, if you go and research established tarot readers, some of them will say that they've worked in restaurants and bars. And so I believed them, I trusted them. But I can say with my personal experience that this is either straight up lies or it's romanticized embellishments, because tarot reading at a restaurant or a bar or during brunch is not the place you should go. It's not the place that you're going to get meaningful clients. It's not the place that you're going to get private. You're not going to get privacy. You're going to sit around bored for a long time. You're not going to get a steady stream of clients. And most people that do come to a restaurant or bar, they want to eat, they want to socialize with who they came with, and then they want to leave. They don't actually want to sit down for, a spiritual awakening or for an experience that deepens their soul or transforms them or opens them up to a new experience. And if it does, the bar scene or the restaurant scene is really not, it's too public, honestly. It's just too public. Whether you're dealing with childhood trauma or a breakup or grief or death, or, just finding your purpose in life, doing these kinds of things in public is really uncomfortable. It's really uncomfortable. And it almost feels like when you get a tarot reading and you're going to a good tarot reader, it feels like you're getting naked. Like they see through you. They see through you. They see through your bullcrap. They see you as if you were standing there naked and vulnerable. And it can be very triggering. It can be very exposure. Just the exposure in a tarot reading can be a lot. And doing this in a public setting is really not appropriate. That's what I learned. Now, I only read in the bar, in the restaurant a couple of times. It only took me a couple of times to be like, this is not what I was told at all. Like, the quote unquote professional tarot readers who said that they did this for years, they must be living in an alternate reality than me, because this doesn't work. It doesn't work. It is not a good place to go if you're wanting to expand your tarot skills. Every single tarot reader has to get experience, right? You can't just rely on book knowledge and pulling cards for friends and family. You have to read for the public. You have to work with people in order to get those soft skills that I was talking about earlier, that really elevate your ability as a tarot reader, that expand your ability to be, a spiritual counselor or a healer or a priestess. You cannot put a price on real world experience. But going to restaurants and bars is not where you're going to get meaningful experience. You definitely are going to get experience. I certainly got experience, but the experience that I got was not valuable. It wasn't as valuable as other methods that I tried later, which I will share with you guys. The advice that I got from these experienced readers was fully lies, embellishments, lies, romanticized version of what they think in their fantasy mind what reading in a restaurant and bar would be like. It's not actually like that. And that's kind of what I came to terms with. After hearing these people's stories talk about, oh yeah, I've been an experienced tarot reader, I've been reading in restaurants and bars for years, and I'm like, really? Because it's not a good scene. It's not a good scene for the work that is meaningful and connective and healing. It's really not. So that is the ramble that I have for you guys today. If you are a young tarot reader, or you're just starting your practice, or you're wanting to expand your ability to, how do I establish a clientele base? Or maybe you're trying to market yourself online and you're finding it difficult because people online, like clients online, don't want to book sessions with someone who doesn't have experience. So it's like a catch-22. In order to get clients, you need to have experience. And in order to have experience, you need to get clients. And so a lot of people find themselves in that stuck in that catch-22. And I think what happens is a lot of people just straight up lie. I think a lot of people just straight up lie, or they embellish, or they make stuff up, They say things that genuinely aren't true. And unfortunately, in the spiritual community, there's no way of knowing if someone is legit or not. It's very much like, you go on faith, or you go on the vibes of someone. You try your best to be discerning, but unfortunately, some people will embellish their resume to say that they have more clientele experience when they don't. And what I found is that all the people that said that they worked in restaurants and bars as a way to gain experience, as a way to justify their professionalism and their prices, I definitely think that they are not being truthful, in my opinion. I don't think that their romanticized story is real. And it's because I tried it, and granted, my personal experience is not doesn't mean that everybody will have this experience. But I do think that there are some elements of working at a cafe or a bar or a restaurant that is not conducive for getting a tarot reading, especially for the style of tarot readings that I do. My style is typically 45 minutes to an hour. It's a comprehensive deep dive. I get really up close and personal with my clients. We turn over every rock, we look under everything, we explore the full picture of a situation. And it's very personal, and it's a very vulnerable experience where you feel very exposed. And part of that exposure is where the healing takes place and the transformation takes place. And through all of this experience of failing, about 10 years ago, I learned that I had to really listen to the type of reader that I was. I wasn't like a sideshow attraction. I wasn't like an entertainer in a bar or a restaurant. If maybe that's your style and you're just an entertainer and you think it's like a magic trick that you're pulling cards for people, maybe you would have a better experience than me in a restaurant. Maybe that's the style of reading that is conducive for those environments, but it wasn't for me. And in my next video, I will talk about reading in a metaphysical shop, because I thought, okay, restaurants and bars, terrible environment. Let me go to a place where people are actually looking for spiritual support. They're intentionally going there for spiritual guidance or spiritual products. Let me read at a metaphysical shop and maybe I'll have a different experience. And I did have a different experience, and it was better, I will say. It was better than reading at a restaurant or a bar or cafe. But it didn't come without its challenges as well, which I will be happy to share with you guys. And through all of these mistakes, through all of these like growth and learning that I did, I learned what worked for me, and I learned the best way of how I was able to establish my business and how I was able to reach people, but it wasn't those venues. So anyway, so my next video, I will share with you guys the different metaphysical shops that I read for, the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between of what it's like to read for the public as a tarot reader. But yeah, in terms of restaurants and bars, did not work for me. It wasn't a bad experience, but it's not the kind of place that I would recommend a inexperienced person go to get experience working with the public. It's really not. And anyone who says that that's part of their credentials as a professional tarot reader, I would be very skeptical of. I would be very skeptical. Be like, really? You really did that? Because I did it, and it was not what I was told. It was not a place that I would recommend someone go to get a tarot reading. Anyway, I would love to hear, have any of you ever read at a restaurant or a bar, or have you ever gotten a tarot reading at a restaurant or a bar? I would love to hear other people's experiences. And yeah, thank you for this ramble. Hopefully you guys found it helpful, and take care. Bye.